Hello everyone, I'm Shishi Zhang, right now a graduate student, and as required by one of my course, English 6-26, which is about the teaching of ESL writing and reading, and I want to interview Professor Buckhoff and mainly about the writing, the teaching of writing.
All right, and as she said, I am Michael Buckhoff. I am a English composition and linguistics instructor at California State University, San Bernardino. I've been here since 1994, so about 18 years. I've been teaching either first year composition classes, upper division composition classes, and also linguistics. In addition to that, I'm also an ESL instructor in the American Culture and Language program, again here at Cal State University, but under the auspices of the College of Extended Learning. So in terms of ESL, I've taught everything at almost every level, and my specialization in the ESL is TOEFL preparation. I teach a lot of TOEFL classes. I also teach grammar classes and any other ESL classes that I'm asked to teach.
Okay, here are my questions, Professor Buckhoff. I really want to know, as I have tutored some of your students, they are coming from Korea, and how do you think about writing?
From an ESL perspective?
Yes.
Okay. It's difficult, and she's referring to, I teach a first year composition class this quarter. It's called English 102B. This is a multilingual class, and in this particular case, what's interesting is a majority, as you know, a majority of the students actually come from Korea. They're in a special program. I think they study in Korea for 1 year, and then is it 3 here?
Oh, yes.
Right, so it's 1 + 3?
Yes, I think they said that.
Yeah. So how do we feel about it? Teaching ESL writing and teaching a multilingual course like this is challenging. It's difficult. I think it's difficult for both the students and the teacher. From my perspective, I'm trying to teach the normal kind of question-answer teaching style that I'm used to, and the teaching style that I use here at Cal State, but most of my students are not used to that kind of teaching style. They're more used to the lecture type style.
Yeah, maybe because of their culture.
Exactly. So to me, that's one of the difficulties I face as a writing instructor. I'm trying to encourage them to express their own opinions about things. So it's not uncommon in my writing class. For example, last Tuesday we were reading one of the reading assignments from a book, and during class I put the students into 4 different groups, and I gave each group a specific question I wanted them to answer from the reading passage, and it's tough. It's hard culturally a little bit. They're trying to break out of the culture and understand that it's okay to talk and to share and to interact in the classroom environment. But even the other challenge, of course, is the language. They read, they understand what they read, but when they try to put it together, you know, in the spoken language, it takes them time. But the one thing I've learned as a ESL instructor is you can't judge a book by its cover. And what I mean to say about that is sometimes I'll have students who are very quiet. Yeah. Some of the Koreans maybe are very quiet. They don't say a lot. But then when they turn in their paper, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of thought in this paper. It's a really good paper. So that's something else with my writing. I've kind of tried to get my mind in the sense that don't judge anybody until you see the writing. And even then you can kind of see the thought process, their writing process, the way they organize, develop ideas, and those kinds of things. So to go back to your question, what do I think about writing? Or I think that it's a rewarding, it's a good experience. It's difficult, but if we work together, the class and me together, I think we can have a good, successful experience.
Yeah, as you mentioned just now, that some students, the Korean students, they don't speak very well, but they write very well.
Correct.
So what do you think is the good writing?
Good writing, interesting. In terms of grading writing, I look at it at several levels. Number one, the assignments that I'm giving have a heavy emphasis on critical thinking. and the writing that I assign also have an emphasis on responding to other people's ideas. So whenever I give them a writing assignment, it's typically a 3 or 4 part writing assignment, asking them to do several things.
Yes.
So in terms of what makes good writing or what makes acceptable writing at the college level, number 1, does the student directly address all aspects of the writing task? This is important. If the student has done that, the next thing is, how does the student organize his or her ideas? Do they have a good intro with a thesis? Are there clear topic sentences in those body paragraphs? You know, is there a conclusion? So I look at the organization and whether or not it's what I call coherent. It's kind of all connected together. So in addition to addressing the task and being organized, I also look at the development. The supporting details. A writer needs to give supporting details to help support the argument that the writer is trying to make, and by using the adequate supporting details, it gives the writer what I call depth and complexity of thought. So this is also important. And then maybe one other area after that is the grammar and the writing.
Yes.
But to me, that's the last thing. Did you notice that?
Yes.
I put it last because with a multilingual class, they are struggling with a few translation problems, with some word choice issues and punctuation and all those things. But the interesting thing is even my native speakers struggle with these kinds of things. But not always exactly. Like ESL students will have different kinds of errors. You might know you speak Chinese, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Chinese basically has 0 verb tenses, or maybe 1 if you want to count present. So in Chinese you might say, yesterday I go, today I go, tomorrow I go. So I think Korean has 3 verb tenses. So they have problems that are typical to their language, but in my case, with a multilingual class, if they have good depth, a strong organization, they've definitely answered all parts of the task. If the grammar errors don't interfere too much in the meaning of the ideas, I think they're completing the assignment. And the one thing I told them though, the one thing I worry about a little bit, it's translation problems.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Right, and the problem is a translation problem. It's not easy to repair, but it also affects the meaning a lot. So sometimes if a paper has a lot of translation problems, I'll typically have the student rewrite that paper. I'll say, look, I'll bracket parts of the paper which are very unclear. I'll say, can you try to reword this maybe in a different way? And the one thing I'm encouraging them to do is I tell all my multilingual writing classes this idea. I say, look, you're going to struggle with your word choice and some grammar and some vocabulary type issues, but every day do something to help improve your English. It might just be reading a newspaper in the morning before you go to class. It could be listening to the radio while you're driving over to see the doctor. It might be reading a book you're interested in. But try to do things on a daily basis that give you contact with either reading or listening to the language. And if they read a lot and they listen a lot and they get more exposure to the language, eventually they make fewer and fewer errors.
Yes. Because
they begin to think more in English and less in their first language. So I'm always encouraging them to try to use the language as much as they possibly can.
So I'm really interested in how to design a very effective curriculum for the teaching of writing. Because as I have learned from the class that there are many aspects to consider while designing a curriculum or syllabi. So I would want to ask you, how do you usually design a curriculum?
Good question. And let me get a copy of one of my syllabi right now. Yeah, this is a question that really, this is really what makes, I think, a teacher, is the syllabus represents the description of the course. It also represents the outline of the course. You basically are showing to the students, you know, what you want to do, what your expectations are, and those kinds of things. So for me, when I'm designing my own syllabus, I'm looking at one right now, by the way. I'll just give you a few tips of some of the headings I put in it. Number one, I always have a course description. I will tell the students exactly what the course is about, what our goals are. I think it's important to understand that. I also will have what's called course materials. It tells them what textbooks they might need or any other relevant information in that area. The next one talks about the course requirements. And within that, I actually take time, like on page 3 here, I actually explain in detail all the writing assignments. In this particular class, I organize my course around 3 basic writing assignments. Now the main thing too is with my multilingual class, each writing assignment is organized around workshops. So, when you're designing your class, what I'll do is once I know what I want to do and how I want to do it, then I get to the course outline and I'll put all of the dates for every single class.
Oh, that is very good for them to follow.
Exactly. Now the first thing I'll do is I'll put when the due dates are for my writing assignments. That's the first thing I do. I don't care about anything else.
Yes.
Like for when is the due date for the first writing assignment, I'll put that. Like let's say it's 3 weeks from now or something, then I'll take the next due date for the next one, I'll put that in the syllabus, and then the third one. Once the writing assignments are in the course outline, then I work backwards and I determine, okay, with this writing assignment, I want several workshops. Usually, I have a self-assessment workshop that I do to help students understand the writing assignment. I also have peer review workshops where other people from the class will read each other's papers and comment on those papers. I typically have at least 1 or 2 of those workshops, and then I have usually 2 editing workshops where they work on editing the paper. So right there, that's probably 4 class sessions that are taken care of because of the workshops. Yes. So from the due date to the writing assignment, I'll go backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll start putting in when I want to do the workshops. And the purpose of the workshops is to scaffold in the student's mind kind of the organization of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. So in addition to really putting in the actual writing assignments and then the workshops needed to complete them, I then start putting in reading assignments and other things like that, and pretty soon my whole class is all organized on paper. So I kind of know exactly what I want to do. So to give you just a short answer is really the most important thing is to think about what your writing assignments are going to be. And with English department, it's not just the writing assignments, but do they comply? Do they meet the objectives of the first year composition program that our department has set out? So we have to kind of make sure that we're designing assignments which are in line with the department objectives. It does take a lot of thinking there. It's a very, very deep, heavy thought process designing a writing class.
Yes, I noticed from a lot of syllabus by several of my instructors that they have different syllabus. So do you have enough flexibility to write your own syllabus, or you have to follow a kind of format from the department or from the higher institution?
Good question. There's not a specific template of how to do a syllabus. Everybody will approach that a bit differently in terms of formatting and things of that nature. But the English department they do have some things they'd like us to put into it. I'll give you some examples. Course description.
Yes.
They want that. Course requirements. They want that. The disability information, students with disabilities, they want you to put in there what the services are at Cal State. They definitely want you to put in that. If you, the grade calculation, how you actually calculate the actual grades for the students, they want that in there. Most of what you'll see here, course description, yes, course materials, course requirements, they like that. You don't necessarily have to put the writing assignments like I did. But you should have some explanation of requirements. Attendance. If you have an attendance policy, anything about writing center visits, I put them in there. Grading policies, I think, is a requirement. They want you to explain exactly how they're graded, how the grade is calculated, even how the work is assessed. You asked me that question, what is writing, how do you assess writing?
Yes.
Also, the ADA information, which is about students, services to students with disabilities. They want us to put this in there. Late paper policy is optional, but I do put a late paper policy in mine so they understand the importance of turning in things on time. I even have a plagiarism policy that I put in here.
Yeah, that is very important.
Yeah, in mine, I've seen some professors' syllabi that are 2 or 3 pages. Mine ends up being 11.
Wow, that's
so mine's a little bit on the long side, but what my syllabus does is, you don't have to have a syllabus which is 11 pages, by the way, but what I do, I organize pretty much the whole course from the syllabus, and that really becomes my notes. It's my notes, my teaching notes, what I want to do in a certain day, which reading passage are we going to discuss, which workshop are we going to be on, and we can change it. I have a course outline, and it is possible. See if I put it in here. We're supposed to put something like, no, I forgot to put it in here, but it's not a bad idea. Right before, when you have what's called, no, this does it here, tentative. By saying tentative course outline, it might be better also if I say this outline may be changed.
Yes.
Or may be subject to change depending on how the course is going and how we're doing, and sometimes we may speed up or slow down a little bit, you know, things like that. But to go back to your question, I think most departments, including the English department, the answer is yes and no. Yes, they do have some things they like us to put into the syllabus, but no, there's not like a certain copy or template of a syllabus that we all use.
Yes.
Each professor, when you look at the different professors' syllabi, you will see they will be different. They're not going to look exactly the same, but they will say things like course requirements or course description. We'll have similar things like that, even though they might be formatted differently.
Yeah. Speaking of the change of the syllabus, how often do you change? Or
it depends. A lot of times I can be pretty good with sticking to things, but sometimes I'll have a class who's struggling unusually with a writing assignment. I can tell a majority of them are still not getting or processing what I'm trying to do, so we may postpone or delay the writing assignment, but I should say that's actually pretty rare. And with my late paper policy, I typically do not accept anything late. However, I do say this because you don't want to be inflexible. So I say in my syllabus, all papers are due at the beginning of class. I will not accept late papers unless you've made arrangements with me in advance. So if you have extenuating circumstances, I will give you an extension. However, you need to talk to me in advance about that. So that's what I tell my students. A student can't come up to me a week after the writing assignment is already due and say, oh, I want to turn it in now. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Go back to my syllabus. I don't accept late work except when. And then I say, well, you didn't really talk to me that you needed an extension. You didn't explain anything to me, therefore I cannot accept it late.
Yes. So, how do you usually think or view the ESL students compared with STOMAC students or other students?
Well, it kind of goes back to that. You can't judge a book by its cover. If you look at the multilingual students, what's interesting about them is they're actually more knowledgeable about grammar and the basic rules than my native speakers are. Now, I'm not saying that my non-native speaker writers don't make writing errors. They do, of course. Both groups do.
Yes.
But they're actually pretty knowledgeable about the mechanics of how English works. Why? Because they've studied English as an adult. So there's actually some kind of neat observations and things. And with the multilingual students, they can add things to the class and to the discussion that I might not get from my native speakers, because my native speakers are only living here in the United States, and I can't always get exactly the same perspective. Like I've had quite a few Chinese students too, and I have about 2 or 3 of them right now in my 104B class, and they're very, very smart. So, and they're always bringing up ideas and things that kind of come from China. And
that's good to hear.
Yeah, they bring up things in there that relate to them when they're back home or something. So they're both good groups of students. They're not exactly the same, but they're both fun to work with. And they both actually make pretty much a large number of errors in their writing, whether they're native speakers or non-native speakers, but not always the same kinds of errors. The problem with my native speaker writers is they have a tendency to write how they speak.
Yes.
So they use sometimes a little bit informal type English in their writing, and I'm trying to explain to them, you know, I'll say this, I'll say, would you wear a suit when you go to the beach, a suit and tie? And the native speaker goes, no. I'll go, well, why not? Well, the beach is fun. I'm not going to wear a suit and tie. And I said, well, would you wear a swimsuit and sandals when you went to a wedding? And they go, no. I'm saying, well, you're writing right now. It's kind of like you're going to a wedding, but you have a swimsuit on.
That's very interesting.
Your writing is too informal. You need to make it more formal. But the problem is they don't know how to do that because they haven't read very much. So some of my native speaker writers, they're a little bit disadvantaged in the sense that for whatever reason they didn't have a lot of contact with reading English before coming into my class, so they have difficulty distinguishing between formal and informal writing.
Yes.
The international students, on the other hand, their speaking skills are not that good, so they're not going to have that kind of a problem, but they're just having problems trying to express their ideas in the new language any way they can. So, in fact, probably the international students, they'll have a tendency to approach writing from a formal perspective, but in almost any way they'll try to write formally. So they'll have trouble writing from the formal to the informal type tone. So each group will have trouble adjusting their tone depending on their experiences and things with writing.
Yeah, I think there's a final question. As each group, the native students and the international students, they don't have the same what we call proficiency in English, the language. So do you always assign a need analysis before you design your syllabus?
Say again now, what was that? I'm not sure
I learned this terminology from one of the articles we read in English 626.
Explain to me what it is. I may or may not have done this. I don't know.
Okay, the need analysis, a kind of analysis that analyze the students, their proficiency, language ability, or their goal for learning this course. So it's mainly you can judge their, or you can give them a test, a very comprehensive exam, a little one, a test, or you can give them writing assignment to know their writing ability.
Well, I don't really have to do that in the sense that the students who get into my 102, 103, or 104, they've already went through a test. It's called the English placement test, right? And from that test, they've already been judged or evaluated in terms of their writing proficiency, their reading proficiency, their grammar proficiency, and all of that. So I already know if I have a 102 class, they're pretty low. They're all going to be pretty low. They'll have trouble pretty much all across the board. They'll have trouble either writing rhetorically or reading rhetorically. They have trouble getting beyond what I call the main ideas of things. Now, once you get into, for example, reading, if my students are trying to get into why a writer is doing something or how a writer is doing something, they struggle with that more as opposed to what is the writer saying. So the rhetorical aspects of either writing or reading, they struggle with those things more. In terms of the goals, the first year composition program already has laid out it's many pages of goals. And I tried to design the syllabus to try to reflect the goals that the university has set out for this first year composition class. So in terms of doing my own neat thing, I don't do that for those reasons.
Yeah, so maybe need analysis is not that necessary for designing the class. Okay, thank you, Professor Buckhoff, for your answering the questions, and thank you for this interview.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.